The Passport of Mallam Ilia by Cyprian Quincy. Chapter 2, Part 3. The Cameroons Campaign 1916. I wish I had remained at that school. There is no doubt that I might, with DJ's help, have forgotten everything. She was kind and gentle, and she did everything in her power to make me happy. Conditions were favorable for reading and meditation, but an impetuous man must always remain impetuous. Such little consolations cannot tie him down. I remained in hiding at Mecca for about a month, trying to glean information about Mallam Usuman. Nobody knew anything about him. Somehow, it didn't seem to make sense. He had been influential enough to send me to jail by mere wave of his arm. Why did they not know him? It was a long time before I discovered the answer. Usuman had changed his name in Mecca, but now he had returned to Nigeria. They spoke so highly of how little he cared for money that I was tempted to expose him. But no one would have believed me if I had told them that the glorious Usuman was nothing more than a first-class scoundrel. This time, I did not find the crossing of the great desert such a pleasant thing as when Mallam Goba heard of buying being my companion. I met several Arabs who were anxious to come to Kano for slaves. They did not know that the slave market had ceased to exist since the British had taken over the town, but I felt that such information would be better acquired by them when they got there. So I offered to introduce them to the big slave dealers, and they gave me a passage in exchange. The crossing took very short time. My companions were anxious to get back to North Africa in time for the big slave market held once a year. As soon as we got to Benin Kwoni in the northwest, I introduced them to one of Prince Kanemi's relations who happened to be there at the time and left them to walk their own way into jail. I entered Nigeria on foot. Inquiry failed to give me any clues about the whereabouts of Mallam. It seemed that he had vanished, or could he be at Mecca still? For a year or two, I wandered about the north. I was almost distracted at that time. I had no home. I could not go back to DJ and her school because what I rightly deserved there was imprisonment. They had treated me as a man of culture and breeding, and I had let them down. Life was torture then. With a paralyzed arm, making a living was difficult. I tried to contact people whom I had known previously and made my way to Kano. I remained there until the outbreak of the Great War in 1914. It was no use trying to enlist as an infantryman because I could not fight, but the army was in great need of men who could walk behind the lines. So once again I found myself in the army in the Pioneer Corps. I knew too that with what Mallam Gobia had taught me, I could help my fellow men a great deal. The soldiers came to me with all sorts of problems. I was able to help them quite often, and my sincere faith and lack of fear gave them strength. In the evenings, we would meet in the barracks and tell stories of the Kano Rising of 1903 and how much more of a man's fight it was than this thing they call the Great War. Why men rode horses and fought with swords. There was no hiding in holes and taking pot shots at unguarded men. I shall never forget when Mallam Usuman said a middle-aged soldier, such a big man and so fond of fighting. "So you knew him?" asked someone else. "Knew him? Why, I fought by his side. He was a man." The speaker smiled and looked around at the group. "I wonder where Usuman is now," I said. "Have you had dealings with him too, Mallam?" I smiled by way of an answer. "Well, I can't answer that. But if I know Usuman, he's in this war of ours. Only he doesn't happen to be in our particular company." A prophetic statement. About a year later, I met Usuman. It was during the Cameroon campaign. You may remember that the German captain von Ruben had occupied a hill in the Cameroons known as Mora Hill. It was our duty to take that hill and uproot the Germans from the Cameroons. When we went against them for the first time late in 1915, they beat us back. Von Ruben called his men the heroic Germans. By early 1916, new troops joined us from the south, from French territory, and from Nigeria itself. The British general in command was much better equipped for the encounter. The result was that the heroism of von Ruben's men ended in a fatal plunge down Mora Hill. During this campaign, I met a learned Mallam attached to the French troops, and we became very friendly. "I've heard a lot of talk about you," he said. "I hear how very helpful you are to the soldiers. They say that you studied under Mallam Ilia." "That is true," I admitted. He was a great man. His voice was warm in praise. "How would you like to come with me to French territory east of the Nigerian border, to places like Fort Lamy, Mandara, Marua, and Suran? That's where I live, and it's a happy place." I said, "It would be very nice to go with you, but I haven't got permission." "Oh," he said, "that's an easy matter. I could get you a passport after the war." When the campaign was over, we didn't leave the area at once. There was a kind of lull. Our troops were encamped on the hill, and at night made a habit of going into the town for a little jollification. My new friend was not a man who liked such pastimes, being a scholar of some repute, but I couldn't always remain in his company when I knew that by joining the other soldiers, I had a chance of meeting Usuman. Under the pretext that I wanted to see the town, I took leave of the Mallam each evening. Within a week, I knew every gambling house in the neighborhood and who ran them. I chose a bar on a corner of the road and went there night after night and chatted with the soldiers. One night, I sat there in a corner where I commanded a view of the door. The soldiers came in twos and threes. Their language was vulgar, and their behavior was even worse. It made me shudder. I was afraid someone might recognize me in these undignified surroundings. The hour was past midnight when a large man came in. My breath failed me as I recognized Mallam Usuman. The yellow light made a shadow of the cut on his cheek. As soon as he entered, he went straight to the proprietor and stood talking to him in very low tones. Suddenly, the proprietor jumped over the counter and Usuman followed him. He opened a private door and together they disappeared. This was my moment. I glanced around, seemed to have noticed the incident. I drew my gown about me and stole quietly towards the door. In their haste, they had left it slightly ajar and I quietly slid through. I pushed the door open and went in. The room was lit by one of those little clay lamps which sent smoke. Mallam Usuman appeared to be trying to sell the proprietor some contraband. He was urging him to pay up, in fact blackmailing him. Up nobody. Usuman turned and saw me. "Ilia," he gasped. "What do you want, you dog?" In a flash, he was upon me. His powerful hands closed around my wrist and the knife I was holding clattered to the floor. We struggled for some time, then Usuman proceeded to strangle me. My throat was parched, lumps stuck in it when I tried to swallow. Suddenly he relaxed and I heard someone shout, "What's going on here?" The soldier who had come in stood at the door, a rifle in his hands, the scared proprietor behind him. His bayonet glinted in the smoky haze. Usuman, who was near the light, suddenly upset it, and for a moment the room was steeped in darkness. There was a spot, a crack, and the soldier cursed. I had heard a crash, and it dawned on me that Usuman must have escaped through the back door. I wormed my way in that direction, remembering the night of the Sanchi, and had just gained it. when I heard a shout of fire, fire. True enough, the house was on fire. Usuman had set the place alight and had again escaped. Another house broken up, I mused as I regained the barracks.